Good morning, folks. This is Father Walsh, and we're going to take a look at this coming weekend, which is the fifth Sunday of Lent. And it talks about, the Gospel reading talks about resurrection and new life. And perhaps a good place to start is, first of all, with regard to the whole question of death and how we feel about death. In many ways, death is the ultimate enemy. We try and stay alive as long as possible. We try and push death away as much as possible. We try and cover it up if at all possible with regard to funeral homes and with regard to burials and stuff like that. And as a priest, sometimes we get so used to dealing with death and funerals and stuff that we don't sometimes realize the reality and how challenging death is. And when somebody dies. Is that the end, or what's going to happen after death? Where do we go from here? Those are such very real questions. Now, when you look at the scriptures, the early Israelites after they were called by God out of Egypt, God made a covenant with them at Sinai. Well, those Israelites, their belief wasn't in an afterlife. Rather, they believed that you lived on in your children, your grandchildren, which I suppose is at least it's that would be consoling to know that. But is it enough? Would you like? It's nice to live on in others, but do you want to live on yourself? I think that's a real question. So for several hundred thousand years, that's sort of the Jewish belief was that you lived on in your children, or that death was the end. It was only like about 150 years before the time of Christ that belief in an afterlife became. You find it in the Book of Wisdom and also somewhat in Ezekiel, the fact that there's the possibility of living on with God. But it was always there was a vagueness about it that you didn't know how it happened, other than that you live a good life and hope that at the end of it that you were going to be raised, that you were going to be brought to a newness of life. Then of course Jesus came on the scene, and while he was on the scene, we find that a couple of times he brought people back to life. One of those times, of course, was this gospel reading on Sunday, where he brings Lazarus back to life, and on Sunday's gospel, for the gospel for Sunday, he says that I am, he says, the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he should die, will be raised up to a newness of life. And then, of course, for himself, we know that after his persecution, his execution, that when he was hung on the cross and when he was after he was taken down from the cross and placed in the tomb, we know that. He actually rose from the dead, and it's because of that he overcame. We believe, and the Church teaches us, that in and through his death and resurrection, he not alone was he raised to a newness of life, but the teaching of the Church is that we also, in and through our belief in Christ, we have the same possibility of living on as an Easter people or as a resurrected person. But I think it's important to keep in mind that as a resurrected person, that it's not exactly the same as our present state. In other words, it's not as if you're going to this old mortal body is going to sort of carry me for the next thousands and thousands of years in the world to come. We think that resurrection is, or we believe, or the Church teaches that resurrection is some kind of transformation, that you're sort of raised up to a newness of life. But anyhow, that's a subject that I'm sure we'll deal with again at Easter time. The bottom line is on this Sunday that Lazarus, as we know, died. Jesus arrived on the scene 4 days later, and after he arrived, we're told that he called, come forth Lazarus. He called Lazarus out of death back into life. But I think it's very important to keep in mind that that's not resurrection as such. It's almost like bringing a dead body just back to life. What we do, like resuscitation, where, in other words, Lazarus came back to the life that he previously had, and We don't know. There's no mention about whether he lived another 5 years or 10 years or 2 years or whatever. The bottom line is what Jesus did. What Jesus did in this instant, and we have to keep that in mind. Is it's not resurrection. So it's not a resurrection to new life. It's sort of brought back to the present form of existence. So when you hear that reading on Sunday, it's a beautiful story of the power of Jesus to transform or to make new. The fact that he brought Lazarus back to life. And I think above and beyond all else, I think that the message really for Sunday is a message that Jesus is the way, as he says himself elsewhere. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He may not bring us back to life in the present age like he did for Lazarus, but our hope and our prayer is that after our own physical death, that because of our belief in him and our efforts to emulate him in this world, that will be raised up to a newness of life where we live with him forever. Thank you.